The human, a typical 20-something-year-old guy, sat at his desk staring at his phone. He was scrolling through a dating app, mindlessly swiping left and right, each rejection pushing him further into the abyss of self-pity. He sighed heavily, closing the app in frustration. "Why is it so hard to find someone who actually gets you?" he muttered to himself, leaning back in his chair. His room was cluttered with half-empty snack bags, video game controllers, and old books, an overwhelming mixture of laziness and unfulfilled potential. The human wasn't exactly a hopeless case, but he was definitely in a slump. It wasn't his fault that every relationship he had been in ended prematurely because of boring, unremarkable sex. He needed something more. He deserved more. But what could he do? He couldn't exactly just wish for the perfect partner to fall into his lap, right? That's when he noticed it. An old, dusty bottle was half hidden behind a pile of fast food wrappers. It was nothing special, just some trinket his grandmother had left him after she passed. Curious, he picked it up. The bottle was smooth and felt oddly warm in his hand, as if inviting him to do something with it. He half joked. "What if I could summon a genie? Maybe she could solve all my problems." It wasn't like he believed in any of that stuff. Magic, genies, wishes, those were just things in movies. But out of sheer boredom, he gave the bottle a little rub. He scoffed at himself, rolling his eyes as if the bottle would somehow answer him. To his surprise, a thick cloud of smoke poured out from the bottle, enveloping him in a swirl of colors. His heart jumped in his chest, and before he could even process what was happening, a figure emerged from the fog. She was beautiful, no, stunning, her features so perfect it was almost unreal. Long, flowing hair, glowing skin, and eyes that sparkled with mischievous wisdom. The genie looked him up and down with a raised eyebrow. "You summoned me, mortal?" Her voice was soft, yet it carried an undeniable power. The human's jaw dropped. Holy crap, you're real?" "Yes, and as you have summoned me, I am bound to grant you 3 wishes," she replied coolly, folding her arms. The human could barely process this. A real-life genie, standing before him, offering him 3 wishes? His mind raced, but he quickly settled on the one thing he knew he had always wanted. Without hesitation, he blurted out, "I wish for the perfect, most satisfying sex life imaginable. Like the best ever. I mean, top tier, no more disappointments. Ever." The genie froze for a second, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Are you sure? That's your first wish?" The human didn't notice her hesitation, too excited at the prospect of his dreams coming true. "Yes. I mean, who wouldn't want that, right? Just make it perfect, like magical perfect. No more bad dates, no more awkwardness. Just perfection." The genie blinked twice, clearly not expecting this kind of wish. "Well, that's an interesting choice. Very specific." She thought for a moment, running a hand through her hair. "But very well. I shall grant your wish." The human grinned, smugly rubbing his hands together. Finally, his sexual frustrations would be a thing of the past. No more disappointing nights, no more bad chemistry. He imagined wild, passionate nights of pleasure that would make any adult film pale in comparison. The genie raised a hand and spoke a few words in a language that made the air around them shimmer. He felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere, a soft tingling sensation rippling across his skin. He smiled, waiting for the magic to kick in. Then, nothing happened. Is that it?" the human asked, unsure if he'd been scammed by the mystical figure standing before him. The genie didn't answer at first. Her eyes flickered to something far away, and then she looked at him. "Wait for it." Just as the human was about to ask what she meant, it hit him. The sensation started slow at first, an unusual warmth spreading through his body. Then, it intensified. His body felt like it was on fire in the best way possible. Every inch of him was alive, hyper-aware. The room around him began to fade into the background as he became consumed by the pleasure coursing through him. Wait! He gasped, trying to make sense of the overwhelming sensation. This is too much." The genie, who had been standing at a safe distance, observed with a mix of amusement and confusion. Her arms were crossed, and she looked concerned, though it didn't stop her from smirking at the sight of the human's reaction. "I told you! Perfection comes at a cost, mortal!" The human was beside himself, trying to steady himself but failing. His mind was foggy, his body was on fire, and all he could think about was more pleasure, more satisfaction, more of this intoxicating, magical sensation. It wasn't just his physical body, even his thoughts were drowning in waves of pleasure. He couldn't focus on anything else. I can't handle this." He stumbled backwards, clutching his head, trying to push the sensations away. But it was like trying to hold back an avalanche with bare hands. "Help! This is way too much!" The genie, still not intervening, simply raised an eyebrow. "You wanted the perfect sex life. Congratulations. This is the result." The human couldn't even formulate a coherent thought. His body trembled with each pulse of pleasure, making it impossible to concentrate or speak. The genie's magic was unraveling him, and the human's dreams were rapidly becoming his worst nightmare. Wait a second!" he cried, trying to grab onto something, anything. "Can't you turn it down a little?" The genie gave him a playful, almost teasing smile. "You're the one who wished for perfection, mortal. If you can't handle it, that's not my fault." He was now on his knees, his face flushed, his body uncontrollably reacting to every little thing. The genie watched with a strange, almost detached amusement, clearly more entertained by his predicament than concerned for his well-being. And that's when he realized this wasn't going to be as simple as he thought. The human, now trapped in a whirlwind of sensation, couldn't even remember the last time he was able to breathe without it feeling like the world was spinning around him. The pleasure was so intense that his limbs felt like jelly. His body was shaking, every fiber of his being crying out for relief, yet the more he tried to escape it, the more it took over. He could barely form a coherent thought, let alone think about how to fix this situation. All he could think was, "What the hell did I just wish for?" His attempts to stand up ended with him collapsing into a chair, his body jerking and twitching involuntarily as the waves of pleasure coursed through him like an electric current. His heart raced, his breathing came in erratic gasps, and his vision blurred. I didn't ask for this," he managed to shout, though it barely sounded like words at all. The genie, still standing across from him, didn't seem fazed. She had a smirk on her face, watching with a detached amusement. "You wish for the perfect sex life, mortal. And this is what perfection feels like." "Perfection?" he gasped, nearly choking on his words as another wave of sensation hit him. "This is insane. I can't handle this asterisk." She raised an eyebrow, clearly entertained. "You seem to be handling it just fine. I'm sure you'll learn to enjoy it soon enough." The human's eyes widened in disbelief. I can't enjoy this," he managed to choke out. His body jerked again, almost as if it had a mind of its own. "It's too much. Too much." He tried to focus, to concentrate on what was happening around him, but every time his thoughts began to form, they were drowned out by the overwhelming pleasure. His legs buckled beneath him, and he slumped back into the chair. His breath came in short, desperate gasps, and it felt like his skin was on fire. The sensation wasn't just physical, it was as if it was everywhere at once. Every cell in his body was buzzing with energy, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop it. The genie was still watching him, an amused glint in her eyes. "So, how's that perfect sex life working out for you?" she asked innocently, though there was something mischievous in her tone. "I didn't mean it like this," he cried out, voice breaking as another wave of unrelenting pleasure tore through him. "You have to fix it. Please. Make it stop." The genie, however, wasn't inclined to help. "You're the one who made the wish, mortal. I'm just a messenger." The human tried to crawl to the edge of the room, hoping that if he could just get far enough away, the sensation would lessen. But his body refused to obey. Every step was like stepping into a vat of molten pleasure. The air around him seemed to shimmer with the intensity of it, as if the entire world was in on this ridiculous joke. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his face flushed with embarrassment as he felt himself becoming more and more out of control. This was not what he'd wanted. This wasn't perfect. This was a nightmare. Desperate, he grabbed onto a nearby bookcase, pulling himself upright. I need a way to control it, he cried. I didn't want this. I just wanted to have a normal sex life. Not this endless, all-consuming madness. The genie, who had been standing silently, tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. So you want control now, huh? Yes. He practically screamed. I can't even think straight. I can't do anything without it taking over. Please, just fix it. The genie let out a light laugh, her fingers tapping against her chin. Well, I suppose I can do that. But there's a catch, of course. The human, barely able to concentrate, blinked up at her, frantic. What catch? She smiled. You'll get control. But that control will come with new problems. There's no such thing as perfect, remember? The human felt a glimmer of hope rise within him. I'll take it. I don't care what the catch is, just make it stop being so overwhelming. The genie's smile widened, and with a flick of her wrist she spoke a few words in a language the human couldn't understand. The moment she finished, he felt the magical pressure lift, just slightly. The waves of pleasure still pulsed through him, but now they were more like intermittent surges, manageable and contained. For the first time since the wish had been granted, he was able to breathe without feeling like his whole body was about to explode. Better? The genie asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. The human took a deep breath, nodding slowly. Why yeah, much better. I can think again. The genie raised an eyebrow. Good. But now that you have control, you should be careful what you wish for. You just got a taste of perfection. And believe me, it's not always as great as it seems. He frowned, still catching his breath. What do you mean by that? The genie shrugged nonchalantly. Now that you have control, you'll probably want more. But you've already experienced the limit. So, be careful what you do next. The human didn't know what to say. This whole experience had been way more than he'd bargained for. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he muttered, still reeling from the previous wave of pleasure that was still lingering in the background. Well, you're already in too deep, the genie said, crossing her arms. You might as well make your second wish, and just hope it doesn't backfire. The human, now feeling a bit more in control but still completely overwhelmed, nodded, but he wasn't sure what to do next. One wish down, and already everything felt out of control. What could possibly go wrong with the second wish? Just tell me I can fix this, he muttered, staring at the genie. Please. The genie smiled. I can't fix anything for you. But I'll gladly help you make your second wish. She was clearly relishing the chaos she'd already created. The human's mind raced. What on earth could he wish for now? He had no idea. The first wish had been too much. And with the second one looming, he had a feeling it would only escalate the absurdity. You might want to think carefully, the genie warned, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Things could get even more complicated. The human gulped. The human, now somewhat in control of the overwhelming pleasure that had engulfed him moments ago, was beginning to regain some semblance of his normal self. His body was still buzzing, but it was no longer a constant, unbearable tidal wave. He could breathe normally, think clearly, and for the first time since the genie had granted his first wish, he felt a bit of hope. But the reality of the situation began to settle in. What had he done? He had wanted a perfect sex life, a simple wish, he thought, but now he had experienced the extreme end of that perfection. It had nearly broken him. If the first wish was anything to go by, he wasn't sure if he could survive the next two. The genie was still watching him, her gaze filled with a mix of amusement and curiosity. Well, mortal, she said with a smirk. You've gotten the first taste. What's next? The human ran a hand through his hair, feeling more confused than ever. I don't know. I really don't. The genie's eyes twinkled. Oh, come on. You can't possibly be this indecisive. What do you want? I just wanted to fix my love life. The human muttered. I didn't ask for this. I didn't know it would be this intense. The genie chuckled. Ah, yes. You wanted perfection, but perfection doesn't come without consequences. Now that you've experienced the best, what's left? You've had the ultimate pleasure. Can you live with it? The human stared at her, realizing that the genie's words were more than just playful teasing. There was a truth there, one he didn't want to admit. Perfection wasn't easy to handle. If anything, it was suffocating. How could he go back to normal after this? And worse, what kind of wish could he possibly make now that would somehow improve on what he had just experienced? He was quiet for a long moment, his mind racing. The first wish had been a disaster, albeit in an incredibly unique and magical way. The genie had warned him about the unpredictability of perfection, but the second wish was still on the table. The stakes were high, and he had to choose carefully. I think I need something more manageable, he said finally, his voice quieter now, more resigned. Something I can actually enjoy. I've had the extreme, but now I want, I don't know, something real. Something that won't break me. The genie raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by his new stance. So, you want to scale back? You're done with the over-the-top magic? The human nodded slowly, feeling a bit embarrassed about how much he had let his first wish get out of hand. Yeah. I think I just want to be with someone who understands me. No more ridiculous, world-shattering pleasure. Just someone who gets it, someone who's real. The genie's expression softened ever so slightly, as though she understood the human's desire for something more grounded. Interesting. So, you want a real connection, not just mind-blowing pleasure. You think that will solve all your problems? He sighed, rubbing his face with his hands. I don't know what will fix it. But I know what I don't want. I don't want to go through another night like the one I just had. The genie considered his words, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her chin as she thought it over. A real connection, huh? You're giving up on perfection already. All right, mortal. Your second wish, then. What is it? The human hesitated. This time, he couldn't make the same mistake. He couldn't just wish for more of the same absurdity. He needed balance. Something that allowed him to truly enjoy life without feeling completely overwhelmed. Finally, after a moment of deep thought, he spoke with more confidence. I wish for the ability to have real, meaningful connections with people. I want to be able to connect with someone on a deeper level, to feel understood, to have intimacy without the craziness. I just want something real. The genie's eyes gleamed with amusement, but there was something else there, a sense of challenge. So, you want the ability to have genuine, satisfying relationships, without any magic interference? He nodded. Yes. I want it to be natural. I want to feel like I'm actually connecting with someone, not just losing myself in magical pleasure. The genie smiled, though there was a hint of mischief behind it. Very well. You've chosen wisely for your second wish, mortal. I shall grant it, but there's a twist. The human, who had been somewhat relieved at his own choice, now felt a twinge of anxiety. A twist? Don't worry, she said, still smiling. It's a small one. You'll see. With that, the genie raised her hand and uttered another incantation, the words flowing effortlessly from her lips. The human felt another pulse of magic ripple through the air, but this time it wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't too much. He felt calm, centered, like he had just made the right choice. The genie's smile widened, her eyes glinting with something almost playful. Done! You now have the ability to connect with others in a deeper, more meaningful way. You'll find it easier to form those bonds, and those bonds will be real, not superficial. Congratulations. The human blinked, surprised at how simple it had been. That's it. That's it. The magic is in the way you communicate, the way you interact with others. You'll find it easier to understand people, and you'll be more attuned to their emotions. No more shallow connections. You're capable of deeper intimacy now. The human stared at her for a long moment, processing her words. He wasn't sure exactly what had changed, but he could feel a subtle difference in the air, as though the world around him was more tangible. He felt like he could understand people better, like he could see them more clearly. It was almost as if the magic had taken away the veil of surface-level interactions and opened him up to something more. He took a deep breath, testing the new power that had been granted to him. I think I can actually feel it, he said quietly. The genie nodded, her arms folding across her chest. Good. But remember, mortal, real connections require effort. They won't come easily, but now you have the ability to find them. Use it wisely. The human nodded slowly, a mix of relief and trepidation flooding through him. The second wish was done, and the magic was now working in his favor. He felt more capable, more ready for something meaningful. But there was still the third wish to go. And after everything that had happened so far, he wasn't sure if he was prepared for the last part of this ridiculous adventure. The genie, sensing his hesitation, grinned. Don't worry. The third wish is the trickiest of them all. But don't take too long to decide. You're running out of time. And with that, the human was left to wonder what on earth his third and final wish could possibly be. The human was still processing the weight of his second wish when the genie's voice cut through his thoughts. So, you're all set now, mortal. You've got the ability to form real, meaningful connections. What will you wish for next? He blinked, still feeling the aftershocks of the magic that had just reshaped his relationships with people. The air around him felt different, lighter, like he had a new layer of understanding about those around him. His mind was clearer now, and for the first time since the genie had appeared, he felt a strange sense of calm. He looked up at the genie, meeting her gaze. I guess I don't need anything more. I didn't realize how much I was missing before. This feels right. The genie raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. What, no grand finale? No outrageous wish to top the others? You've got one more left, mortal. Don't waste it. He stared at her, torn between wanting to be done with all this magical chaos and the fear that if he didn't make another wish, he would miss some golden opportunity. His first two wishes had been a roller coaster, and although the second one had made things a lot easier for him, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he wasn't quite finished. I'm not sure what to wish for anymore, he said, rubbing his temples. I've had enough of the craziness. Maybe I should just leave well enough alone. The genie's lips curled into a smirk. Oh no. That's not how this works. You don't get to stop now. You've got one wish left, and I'm here to make it happen. So, what's it going to be? The human groaned inwardly. This was the third and final wish. He couldn't screw it up. But what could he possibly want now? The first wish had been a disaster of epic proportions, and the second one, while useful, hadn't been without its complications. He thought back to what the genie had said about perfection, how it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Maybe he didn't need perfection after all, but there had to be something he could wish for that would make his life better. I guess I want to be content, he said slowly. I don't need anything extravagant, just a peaceful, fulfilling life. I don't need to chase pleasure or relationships or anything. I just want to wake up and be happy with what I have. The genie cocked her head, studying him for a moment, as if weighing his words. So you want peace. You want satisfaction without all the extremes. You want to live in the moment without wishing for more. The human nodded, a sense of quiet conviction filling him. Yeah, that's exactly it. No more chaos. Just peace. The genie smirked again, her eyes flashing with an almost dangerous gleam. I see. You've learned your lesson then. You want balance, not perfection. You want control over your life, not chaos. Very well. With that, she raised her hand, and the familiar pulse of magic surged through the air. This time, the human could feel it settle inside of him, like a wave that calmed rather than overwhelmed. The feeling was different, softer, almost comforting. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt as though the weight of his desires had been lifted. The genie gave him a knowing smile. There. Your final wish is granted. The human blinked, testing the sensation. He felt content. It wasn't some overwhelming wave of satisfaction. It wasn't ecstasy or the intense pleasure he'd felt earlier. It was a quiet contentment, a sense of fulfillment without needing anything more. He felt at peace, like he had everything he truly needed. I feel it, he whispered, almost in disbelief. I feel like I can just be. The genie stepped back, her smile softening for the first time. Good. That's the magic of contentment, mortal. No more chasing after impossible ideals. No more endless striving. Just living. The human exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything he had asked for finally settle into place. The magic had worked, perhaps not in the way he'd imagined, but in a way that was far more valuable than anything he could have expected. For the first time, he realized that sometimes, what you truly need isn't something grand or extraordinary. Sometimes, it's just the ability to be at peace with what you have, to accept your life as it is without constantly wishing for more. The genie's gift hadn't been about giving him more pleasure or more magic. It had been about showing him how to find happiness without the need for either. He turned to the genie, feeling a genuine gratitude he hadn't expected to feel. Thank you. I didn't understand before, but now I do. I didn't need to be perfect or have everything. I just needed to be. The genie gave a small, approving nod. You've learned well, mortal. It's rare for someone to understand that so quickly. You're free now. Go live your life. With that, the genie began to fade, her form shimmering and dissolving into the air. The human watched her go, feeling no sorrow, no longing. For the first time, he didn't need anything more. The genie had shown him that what he had was enough. As the last trace of her presence disappeared, the human stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The world felt different now, but in a way that made sense. His life didn't need to be filled with magic or grandiose wishes. It just needed to be lived. And for the first time, he was okay with that. With a deep breath, he turned and walked away, content in the simplicity of what he had found.